Don't your feelings.
Hey everyone, so hopefully you've been doing well. Yeah. Anyway, if you are on social media, it doesn't matter if you're on Twitter, Instagram, or even TikTok. Uh, it's quite a questionable site right now, if I'm being honest. You should be aware of everything that has been going on in America in the past week. And honestly, this has been beyond just the past week, but people only take notice of brutal situations when they get visual information, and I personally think that this is disgusting and that we can do better. So today we'll be breaking down terminologies that are often used on woke Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, essentially all the social media platforms. So maybe you're not aware of what they mean in the grander scheme of things, but we are here to break them down for you. So you can no longer use I don't know what you're talking about, or I don't really know what this is. I don't really want to Google it as an excuse for your silence. So the topic today is racism. So let's break down what racism actually means. The Wikipedia definition is prejudice, discrimination, antagonism directed against someone of a different race based on the belief that one's race is superior. So this is very important to note that depending on where you are in the world, where you are geographically determines whether or not you are a majority or minority.
Yeah, and I think to expand on that and make people, I guess, understand on a more layman terms is that, like if you're Chinese Singaporean studying or living in Australia, you are the minority because you're Asian. But when you come back home to Singapore, you are the majority as a Chinese Singaporean. The systems and roles are put in place to put you at an advantage to your brown counterparts. And I think before anyone gets their panties twisted, but I think it's important to know that yes, there are white people in Singapore, and yes, they are the minority, but that is just in numbers. They're not actually oppressed here in our society. White people can, I guess, experience negative sentiments from Asians or from Singaporeans, and that's mostly negativity harbored from us being colonized. For those who don't know, Singapore was a British colony. And I think that it's important to know that they may be a minority, but that does not mean that they are oppressed. They cannot be oppressed because the system put in place in Singapore still favors white counterparts than it does brown counterparts, whether you're like Indian or Malay or Filipino and all of that.
Yep.
And I mean, that's really obvious in colorism in Singapore, where we believe that, fair is better, Chinese people are hardworking, and that brown people are lazy.
Yeah, so one thing that never changes is the fact that white people will never face racism simply because reverse racism does not exist. And maybe we will discuss this in the next podcast. But I think it's also important to take note that being oppressed and being embarrassed are two completely different things. One puts you in actual danger, the other is just embarrassing, right? So racism is not simple. It's not black and white. It is complex and not to be taken lightly. Racism exists on a spectrum. Therefore, whether we choose to admit it or not, we exist somewhere on that spectrum. And I think us as Singaporeans have an issue admitting to that. Now, racism is a belief that one's race is superior, which means to say that racism has been learned and it is something that we need to unlearn in order to fix a problem, right? So in order to fix the problem, you need to acknowledge that a problem exists.
Yeah.
So like I said before, like we exist somewhere on the spectrum, and we need to admit that we exist somewhere on the spectrum instead of denying, which is what Singaporeans do most of the time. I mean, okay, I'm not just gonna say Singaporeans, but I am a Singaporean, so I'm just gonna speak. Yeah. But anyway, instead of denying that we're somewhere on the spectrum, what we can do is we unlearn these prejudices and move towards being better allies for minorities, right? So, okay, let's just talk about what covert and overt racism is about, okay? Because I think you might be coming into contact with like these terminologies, and you might not understand, and you do not have energy to Google these terms maybe, but here we are. We're going to break it down for you. So first, let's break down what is covert and overt racism. So covert racism is a form of discrimination that is disguised and subtle. Overt racism is the complete opposite of that. It's just very open and direct. It's an obvious form of racism. So for example, in a casual conversation, a Chinese friend casually mentions that Alex, a Malay folk, is always late to meet our other friends. And so this Chinese friend would say, yeah, they're Malay lah, it's okay. Don't have such high expectations, it's okay. They're just like that. So I want you guys to pay attention to the tone and the language used. Okay, the tone, very relaxed, not aggressive at all. And the language used is something that it's a common stereotype in Singapore that Malay people are lazy. So it's so common that people are just willing to accept, right? But I mean, it's slowly changing, but people are still willing to accept. So covert racism, this is a form of racism that is so subtle because it is rationalized in a way where society is more willing to accept all these terminologies and they don't pay attention to it that much. This form of racism happens subconsciously because we talk about like stereotypes and all these things so often that it is happening so subconsciously. So it is not true, right? It is not true. Whatever they say in the textbooks or what you say in the pledge, we aspire to be that, but it's not true that you're not a racist. You're just not willing to admit that what you said is covertly racist. Whereas overt racists are people like Trump. I'm not going to give an example of what overt racists say or do because I think you can pretty much imagine what they do. So honestly, sometimes even Trump pretends that he's a covert racist, and that is honestly so dangerous, right? You pretend that you're not a racist, but you say all these racist things, influencing like people and whatnot. It's dangerous, especially since he's such a anyway. So like I said before, we exist somewhere on the spectrum of racism, and instead of denying, we need to unlearn these prejudices and move towards being better allies for minorities and Black folks.
Yeah, so now I guess before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we can never experience or understand the pain and oppression and the fears that Black folks face. We speak about these as allies to educate non-BIPoC, that means non-Black, Indigenous, people of color. And we are speaking this especially towards our Asian community because that's a community that we come in frequent contact with. We like to share that there are many amazing social media activists that you can follow and learn from. Rachel Cargill at Rachel Cargill, You're Doing Great, Healing While Black at Healing While Black, Vienna Rai at V Rai, and so much more. We'll put them all in the description box below. So let's just understand that like if you're here to like learn from us, you can definitely go out there and search for more resources to get further educated. So let's begin with the N-word and why it's not okay to say it. It's offensive. Well, it's not okay. It's not okay. Like it triggers memories and trauma from slavery and hate. The word itself was conceptualized to keep Black folks under. It's a language of oppression. It's created to be intentionally degrading. It carries a lot of history of racial discrimination, and that still exists to this day. It still has tangible, emotional, mental, and physical impacts on Black folks today, and it's just not okay for you to act like it's just a word, because it's not just a word. You can't say it if you have Black friends. You can't say it even in a song. Like, no excuses.
You can't say it, period.
Yeah.
Period. Just don't fucking say it.
Yeah. And then I know people might think like, oh, but like I'm in Singapore, we do have a Black community in Singapore. It's just really small. And you might say that, well, I don't come in contact with Black people, so like I'm not anti-Black because I just don't interact. And that's the thing though,
they'll probably just say that I'm not racist lah, right?
Yeah. But I think it's good to acknowledge that there is anti-Blackness within non-BIPoC communities, and this is again to address Asian communities because this is the one that we come in close contact with. So with that being said, one would be through means of colorism and appropriation of culture. Here we always think that fair is better. There's like beauty products that's supposed to lighten your skin and brighten your skin, and people dressing in a certain way, and like we know that like you get this inspiration, you like the aesthetics that you see in hip-hop culture and like the clothes that black rappers wear and everything. And I think it's one thing to be inspired and like the aesthetic, it's another thing to completely appropriate it. I mean, like, just the idea, like, Google Asian rappers and you see so many of them with dreadlocks, and that is not okay, because that is appropriation. There's a fine line between appropriation and appreciation, and I think we are at a point where we understand what that is. It's just whether or not you choose to act appropriately. Okay, next would be getting off being a model minority. I mean, when you think about the representation of Asian people, it's always Asians are smart, Asians are good at math, Asians are all gonna be doctors one day or scientists. And if you don't question why that is, that our black friends don't get this kind of positive stereotypes, then you're part of the problem, man. Like, and if you're not doing anything to change that narrative, especially when it comes to black people, then you're still a problem. Up next would be dating preferences. So that could be either not wanting to date black people because of your own racism or because of colorism, and the other part is only wanting to date black people because that's like a part of fetishization. Up next would be performing allyship. Now, this is something that we see often on social media, and I think the key word here to remember is performing. It's not enough to just have black friends and post photos of yourself with your black friends. It's not enough to just share posts on Instagram. It's about having conversations within your communities and inciting change within your own community as well, and making space for black folks to come and talk. You can sign petitions, you can donate if you have the means to. If you don't have the means to, you can always direct these resources and avenues to people who do have the means to help and support financially. With that being said, we do have links down to different petitions and different donations down below, so feel free to just do as much as you can, especially if you're not in America, especially if you're based internationally like us.
I mean, like, we can still do something and not just keep quiet about it, which brings me to my next point, right? Why is the behavior of people saying, oh, like, we're not in America, we don't have to speak out about it, or, you know what, I'm not political, like, I don't want to get into the drama and stuff like that. It's so dramatic. Politics is so dramatic, and I just don't want to get into this. So why is this type of behavior dangerous? And I think the only thing I can say, and it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, is the fact that political ignorance and staying politically neutral is not cool. It's not cool. Like I don't know how else to say it. It's not cool, because by not taking a stand, you are actually taking a stand. And how does this make sense is the only biggest example that I can pull out is the fact that Donald Trump is the president. People choose not to take a stand, therefore they took a stand, and the result is as such.
I think not taking a stand as well shows how much privilege you have, because it shows that you're not affected by what's happening in the world, and you don't bother, you don't care enough about what's happening to other people in the world. And we throw the word privilege around a lot, and I think I'm just going to quickly explain what privilege is. So privilege is when a particular group or a particular individual receives special rights, benefits, and advantages over another group or over another person. So I guess like in race politics and theory, it's about receiving privilege just for being a particular race, regardless of your sex and gender and other positionalities. One example I can think of right now is being a queer white person. I think you receive privileges just for being a white person, and just the fact that you are a queer white person does not excuse you from privilege. It does not mean that you cannot do anything within your power to actually help those who are actually far more marginalized and oppressed. And privilege can come in many forms and different ways. You know, you can mean having a positive relationship with the state and with the authority, having representation in media, and I mean positive representation in the media. So that means it could be in children's books and movies and even in histories. Like how many, like just reading about Singapore's history in itself, the way the British being represented is so positive, despite the fact that they literally colonized us. And this brings me to my next point in academia and the fact that your history is being shared. Your history is the main curriculum, like just white history being the history that you freaking learn. I don't know how else I can put that away.
Maybe we can talk about colonization somewhere else, you know. But yeah.
Definitely. I think I want to bring a guest on that. I really know I have in mind.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, but anyways, as I was saying, you know, like if I were to learn anything about Southeast Asian history, I would never get the chance to learn that as it is. I would have to take it as an elective, and the fact that you don't have to take a history as an elective shows privilege as well. And even then think about it, like if I want to learn about Indian history, so many of the resources are white. Like I wouldn't have the opportunity to read sources from Southeast Asian folks unless I go out and look for it, because in university, like people who read, who write about Asian histories are white. Why that is, I don't freaking know, but that is in itself privilege.
Yeah, I think like it's safe to just point out, and to like you're in Melbourne Uni, right? So
yeah, I mean I study in the University of Melbourne, so I live in Melbourne. Continuing on, and how privilege exists in different forms. Next up would be the ability to escape violent and negative stereotypes that's associated with race or with color of your skin. I mean, if I'm gonna call a white person Karen, I mean, whatever, like you wanna get offended, but me calling you Karen has no impact on you, has no physical impact on you. If someone calls me a brown terrorist, that puts me in immediate danger, like immediately. So I don't care.
Yeah, so people have to be like, were you about to make a joke? Sorry,
it's okay.
No, it's like people have to start acknowledging the fact that they can be offended, right? But it doesn't put them in danger, right? Then you all need to like really think about it. Like if you're the one who is being if you're the one who is being marginalized or discriminated, obviously you will be aware of the dangers and all these things. But if the coin flips, right, and you're in a country where you're the one putting all these other people in danger, you need to realize that being offended and being in danger are two completely different things. Like what I talked about earlier, right? Like being in danger and being like embarrassed are two completely different things. So like being called Karen, yeah, you're embarrassing because like all the things you do are embarrassing, but you're not in danger at all, right? Like you won't get fired because you're a damn Karen, right?
Yeah. I think the last point that I have is that most, if not all, spaces are made for you. That's how you know that you are privileged, which is why like POC safe spaces exist, which is why POC friendly yoga or like POC only media magazines exist, because these spaces don't exist for POC people. All of which, you know, these safe spaces need to be created to allow POC individuals to flourish and be heard and express their thoughts, their desires, and be creative. And like I know there's still going to be people who say like, oh my god, having like POC only blah 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 is discriminating. And honey, you don't know what discriminating is. Like just don't even get me started, but you know what? We're gonna talk more about privilege in the next episode, okay?
Yeah, so like Abida said, this podcast will be split into two. In this episode, we talked about racism, we talked about certain terminologies, and we grazed the issues and the impact and the issues that Black people are facing in America. and why it is not okay to say the N-word. And of course, how a lot of things we talked about in this episode. But in the next episode, we will be talking about racism in the context of Singapore. Now, the main takeaway, I guess, from this session would be to acknowledge that racism is on a spectrum, and you have to check yourself and identify where exactly you are on that spectrum and start unlearning these prejudices and start working towards being better. And yeah, I think
with what we've provided you today, just seek more knowledge on how you can be better allies. Again, follow as many activists as you can, donate, sign petitions, everything will be down below in the description box again.
Yeah, and I think I can speak on behalf of Amina that if we are explaining things not to its fullest capacity and you think that you can add on to whatever we have explained, do leave these pieces of information in the comments down below, and you can even email us, because right now we are also learning, and that's the thing. Anyway.
100%. We're still learning how to be better allies every single day, and it's something that you need to actively do and not just do when something really terrible happens. And it's something that needs to be carried on a day-to-day basis, not just something that you do once in a while to show that you're woke.
Yeah. All right, then thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Just stay safe, and we'll see you on the next episode. See ya.
Bye.